There is something rare and quietly transformative about being truly known by another person, not just noticed, not just admired, but genuinely seen in the way that reaches beneath the surface. Most people move through their entire lives without ever experiencing that kind of depth. So take a moment right now, just breathe, and let yourself be present here, because what you are about to hear may resonate somewhere inside you before your mind even has a chance to catch up. Someone who is younger than you has been thinking about you far more than they ever planned to. The feelings have grown more intense than they were prepared for, and more emotional than they are ready to confess to anyone, including themselves. And here is what might surprise you. None of this began with something superficial. It was not your looks alone, and it was not the result of any deliberate attempt to impress them. It started because your presence touched something in them that almost nobody else reaches. Something grounded, something honest, something that feels startlingly real in a world where most things feel hollow. Whether either of you fully understands it yet, the two of you have already begun shaping each other's inner worlds in ways that run deeper than ordinary experience. There are certain people who walk into our lives and quietly shift our emotional foundations. They do not create disruption through chaos or noise. They do it through a kind of emotional gravity that pulls without explanation. Carl Jung wrote extensively about the unconscious forces that shape who we are drawn toward and why. What most people never consider is that attraction rarely obeys simple rules. Human beings move toward people who offer something their interior world is missing. And sometimes a younger person finds themselves powerfully drawn to someone older, not because they are searching for authority or guidance, but because they sense a kind of emotional richness they cannot locate anywhere else in their life. Not someone who is perfect, but someone who carries emotional substance. Someone who feels real in a way that has become increasingly hard to find. You may have already caught glimpses of this without naming it. A look that lingered a little longer than necessary. A strange nervousness they carry around you that they cannot quite hide. The way they bring up something small you mentioned weeks ago, something you had already forgotten. The way the energy in the room quietly shifts the moment you arrive. Perhaps you dismissed it. Perhaps you told yourself that you must be misreading things, that it seemed unlikely, that surely it could not be as significant as it felt. But emotional attraction does not answer to logic. The subconscious mind responds to feelings of safety, depth, and unspoken understanding far more powerfully than most people realize or are willing to admit. The first thing drawing them so strongly toward you is the quality of your emotional energy, the way it feels completely unlike what they are used to moving through every day. Most people their age are surrounded by emotional inconsistency, conversations that go nowhere, connections that feel more like performances than genuine exchanges, attention that arrives quickly and disappears just as fast. They live in a world where communication is constant, but understanding is rare. And then they meet you, someone who speaks with intention, someone whose silence carries meaning rather than discomfort, someone who does not scramble for validation or chase after approval. That difference registers in them on a level they cannot fully articulate. What they feel in your presence is not simply attraction, it is something closer to relief. Relief from the noise, relief from the constant pressure of pretending. When you speak calmly, they feel steadier. When you actually listen without preparing your next response, they feel seen for the first time in a long while. When you remain composed in moments where others spiral, their nervous system begins quietly learning to associate you with safety. That association builds gradually, and then it becomes something they cannot separate themselves from, because steadiness is something many younger people are quietly starving for without knowing how to name it. Part of what makes this even more compelling is that you have never seemed to need their attention. You carry yourself with a natural self-possession that creates curiosity without effort. There is a widespread assumption that attraction grows from trying harder, being louder, revealing more. Psychologically, the opposite tends to be true. Restraint creates mystery. Inner stillness creates fascination. When someone cannot immediately read every layer of you, their imagination begins filling in the spaces. And imagination attached to real feeling is extraordinarily hard to walk away from. This is why they replay small moments from your conversations late at night. Why a brief exchange can carry an emotional weight that surprises even them. Why they pay close attention to the tone of your voice, the pauses between your words, the moments when your focus shifts. Your presence has activated something in their subconscious, and once that happens, the attachment deepens quickly, especially when loneliness already exists beneath the surface. Loneliness is one of the most misread emotional experiences in human life. People tend to think it simply means being physically alone, but many of the loneliest people are surrounded by constant contact and endless stimulation. Younger generations in particular often experience a particular kind of exhaustion where they receive tremendous amounts of attention but almost no real emotional intimacy. They are desired without being known. They are entertained without being understood. And then someone like you appears, someone whose emotional presence feels intentional rather than scattered, and something in them that had been quietly closed begins opening again. You may not see yourself this way, but to them, your calmness in moments of emotional chaos is not a small thing. It is almost sacred. The nervous system becomes deeply attached to whatever consistently makes it feel at rest, and you have become that for them without even trying. The second reason this attachment has grown so intense is that you embody a kind of emotional maturity they quietly crave for themselves, and this runs much deeper than romantic feeling. When they look at you, they are looking at a version of emotional balance they are still working to build within themselves. You represent something aspirational in a deeply psychological sense, not because your life has been without pain, but because the pain clearly shaped you into something more thoughtful rather than more closed. People who have been through genuine emotional difficulty and come out the other side still capable of softness carry a different kind of energy. There is a quiet sadness to it sometimes, but also a warmth, a sense that they understand human pain from the inside rather than the outside. Younger people feel exposed around this quality because real depth recognizes real depth. Your experiences speak even when you say nothing about them. The way you respond to disappointment without collapsing. The way you protect your inner peace without turning cold. The way you no longer exhaust yourself chasing after love that does not meet you halfway. All of this quietly communicates emotional intelligence that cannot be faked, and they notice. They study the way you carry yourself, the moments where you choose silence over reaction, the subtle signs of someone who has learned from experience rather than just accumulated years. They wonder what formed you, what broke you open, and what you built from the pieces. Why your eyes sometimes seem to hold both strength and sorrow at once. Human beings are naturally drawn to emotional complexity because it signals something real, and realness in a world full of performance becomes irresistible. Sometimes this attachment is born in a single quiet moment. Perhaps you noticed their pain when no one else did. Perhaps you spoke to them without any trace of judgment. Perhaps you treated them with the kind of emotional care that most people only pretend to offer. Never underestimate what genuine emotional safety means to a generation that has largely learned not to need anyone. Many people are privately aching for gentleness while working very hard to appear like they need nothing at all. When someone like you offers something real, the impact can be overwhelming, precisely because they were not expecting it. But here is where the psychology becomes more layered. The younger person often does not fully understand what is happening inside them. At first they might call it admiration, then curiosity, then attraction. But slowly it builds into something they cannot simply set down. They find themselves wanting your attention more than they had planned. Your approval begins quietly influencing their emotional state. Your silence starts to feel heavy in a way that surprises them. And the confusion grows because the intensity seems disproportionate to the actual time you have spent together. What they are experiencing is something psychologists call emotional imprinting, a largely unconscious process where the nervous system begins attaching feelings of security to a specific person. This happens most strongly when someone enters our life during a period when we already feel emotionally vulnerable. If they were feeling unseen or disconnected or quietly lost when you first appeared, your presence may have become woven into their sense of emotional stability without either of you planning it that way. Once that imprinting takes root, ordinary moments begin carrying extraordinary emotional weight. A message that takes longer than usual to arrive feels personal. A brief conversation leaves an impression that stays for days. A small expression of warmth echoes far longer than seems reasonable. Even your absence becomes a kind of emotional presence because the subconscious mind always amplifies what it fears losing. This is worth sitting with, especially if you are someone who tends to carry calm naturally. Your steadiness can become someone else's emotional anchor without you ever intending it. Your understanding can become the one place another person feels genuinely held. That is a beautiful thing and a significant responsibility at the same time. The third reason they are falling for you so deeply comes down to something particularly powerful in the psychology of attraction. You create both emotional safety and emotional mystery simultaneously, and that combination is extraordinarily rare. Most people manage to offer one or the other. Someone might feel exciting but ungrounded. Someone else might feel reliable but completely predictable. But when a person feels genuinely safe with you while also sensing that there are still depths in you they have not fully reached, the subconscious becomes intensely fascinated. Your emotional complexity becomes something they cannot stop trying to understand. They search your expressions. They sit with your silences. They notice the small shifts in your energy because they are unconsciously trying to map the interior landscape of who you are. And the more they sense that there is more to discover, the more compelling the whole experience becomes. Jung described something he called projection, the unconscious tendency to place our unmet emotional needs and idealized inner images onto real people in our lives. In simple terms, they may not only be responding to who you actually are, they may also be responding to who they need you to be. Maybe they see safety in you because they never had a consistent source of it. Maybe they see emotional steadiness because they have been surrounded by unpredictability. Maybe they see quiet strength because they are exhausted from carrying invisible weight entirely alone. These needs are genuine even when the perception is not yet fully accurate. And because those needs run deep, the attachment accelerates rapidly. The complication is that eventually reality makes itself known. You are human. You have fears, limitations, difficult days, contradictions, and wounds of your own. No one can carry another person's emotional fantasy indefinitely. And the moment when the fantasy meets reality is often the moment that determines whether a connection transforms into something genuine or fractures under the weight of expectation. Real love begins exactly where fantasy ends, and that transition, as disorienting as it can feel, is often where younger people begin growing in meaningful ways, because genuine emotional connection forces self-examination. It surfaces every fear that was waiting underneath: fear of being left, fear of not being worthy, fear of needing someone too much, fear of becoming truly visible to another person. All of those buried things begin rising when attachment deepens because intimacy always reveals what remains unhealed. You may notice them pulling emotionally close one day and retreating the next. This inconsistency is rarely calculated. More often, it is fear wearing the costume of distance, the fear of wanting someone too much, the fear of losing the upper hand emotionally, the fear of discovering that the feeling is not mutual. Younger people in particular can struggle to hold emotional intensity without either clinging or withdrawing, because they are still learning how to stay present with feelings that feel too large to manage. And if you have moved through enough of your own emotional history, you already know how terrifying real vulnerability can be. People talk about love casually, as though it is comfortable. But genuine emotional intimacy is one of the most psychologically demanding experiences a human being can have. To truly care for someone is to hand them the ability to affect you in ways that are out of your control. Their silence can land heavily. Their distance can shift the entire feeling of your day, and many people spend years insisting they do not need that kind of closeness simply because needing it once made them bleed. This is often the truth underneath emotional unavailability. It is not indifference. It is old heartbreak wrapped in the appearance of independence. And when your warmth begins quietly dissolving the protective layers someone built over years of disappointment, the attachment they feel can seem almost impossible to contain, even to themselves. Jung might describe this as encountering someone with genuinely integrated emotional energy, a person who has moved through their own shadow material and emerged with both self-awareness and emotional warmth intact. Younger souls feel that quality instinctively. They cannot always name what they are sensing, but they feel it. They sense when someone has genuinely suffered, genuinely reflected, and come through the experience still fundamentally open. That kind of depth cannot be imitated, and in a world where so much is surface, it becomes unforgettable. Modern attraction tends to move quickly and shallowly. People learn how to appear appealing without learning how to actually connect. Relationships become temporary distractions from loneliness rather than genuine encounters between two interior worlds. So when someone meets a person who still moves slowly with intention, who values emotional honesty over performance, who does not confuse attention with intimacy, the experience can feel almost disorienting in its realness. That is a significant part of why they cannot stop thinking about you. Not because you did anything extraordinary in the conventional sense, but because you made them feel something genuinely true in the middle of so much noise. And perhaps some part of you already knew this before these words found you. Perhaps you noticed the particular way they look at you, the way they seek your attention without quite admitting it, the way your distance creates a shift in their energy they try to hide but cannot quite manage. Human beings communicate emotional attachment in hundreds of small ways long before they are willing to say it directly. But there is a distinction worth holding on to here. Sometimes people fall in love not exactly with who you are, but with how they feel when they are near you. That is a meaningful difference, because emotional chemistry, as powerful as it is, can produce its own kind of illusion. Someone might feel more alive in your presence than they have in years and interpret that aliveness as certainty. But emotional intensity and emotional compatibility are not always the same thing. Some connections are not built to last the way we might want them to. Some are meant to awaken rather than anchor. Even those connections, the ones that do not end in permanence, can leave lasting marks on who a person becomes. Some people arrive carrying a kind of mirror. Through them, we see our own loneliness more clearly, our hunger for understanding, our quiet fear of becoming emotionally invisible, our desire to still matter to someone. And sometimes a younger person's genuine feeling for you awakens emotional parts of yourself that had quietly gone dormant. They remind you that the capacity for depth and connection is still alive in you, that despite everything life has moved through you, you are still capable of profoundly affecting another human being. That is not a small realization, it is actually a quietly staggering one. Many emotionally mature people carry a hidden loneliness beneath a very composed exterior. They have become skilled at functioning while something inside them remains quietly starved. So when unexpected and genuine affection arrives, it does not only create warmth. Sometimes it surfaces grief too. Grief for years spent guarded, for versions of yourself that life gradually talked you out of trusting, for the emotional openness that disappointment slowly taught you to contain. When someone looks at you with real fascination and tenderness, it can shake something loose that you had convinced yourself was long settled. But honesty matters here too. Ask yourself carefully whether they are responding to who you genuinely are or to what you represent in their emotional world. Are they in love with you or in love with how safe and significant they feel around you? These two things can overlap, but they are not identical. Real love requires seeing another person clearly, past the projections and past the emotional needs they bring. And that kind of clear seeing rarely arrives immediately. It develops through time and honesty and the willingness to let the fantasy soften into something more human. Still, none of this makes their feelings less real in the moment they are experiencing them. Feelings rooted in emotional projection still carry genuine pain and genuine tenderness. Attachment born from loneliness still feels like love from the inside. Human emotions are not made less valid by being psychologically complicated. In fact, the experiences that feel most significant are almost always the ones that are most contradictory. Love and fear sharing the same moment, closeness and the urge to flee existing simultaneously, longing and terror sitting side by side. Human beings are layered in ways that simple language rarely captures completely. Someone younger may be drawn to you because your emotional groundedness makes them feel protected, or because your own pain makes them feel less alone in theirs, or because the mystery of who you are keeps pulling their imagination forward, or because your gentleness has been quietly healing something in them they never talked about with anyone, or because the person you are somehow reflects a version of themselves they are still trying to grow into. The heart operates in ways that resist simple explanation, and perhaps that is part of what makes these connections so visceral. Not their certainty, but their emotional unpredictability. The way they arrive before you have time to prepare. The way ordinary moments become quietly charged. The way a single conversation can stay with you for days without your permission. If there is one thing emotional maturity eventually teaches, it is this. Do not let yourself be consumed simply by the experience of being desired. Desire can be temporary. Projection fades. Loneliness has a way of costuming itself as love convincingly enough to fool even the most self-aware person. Instead, watch for emotional consistency. Watch for honesty over time. Ask whether the connection produces peace underneath the intensity, or whether it only offers the sensation of passion while quietly unsettling everything beneath it. Because the right kind of connection should deepen who you are, not leave you feeling less like yourself. And yet, there is something genuinely beautiful about being emotionally chosen by someone unexpectedly, especially when they notice things in you that the rest of the world moved past. Sometimes younger people see emotional beauty that older hearts have stopped recognizing in themselves. The patience you carry. The depth that has developed through experience, the warmth that exists beneath the guardedness, the intelligence that lives in your silences. Do not make the mistake of treating those qualities as ordinary. They are not. Emotional memory lives in the nervous system for years. People carry forward how specific individuals made them feel long after every other detail has blurred. Some connections alter a person's interior world permanently, not because of grand gestures, but because of the quality of presence two people shared. Maybe that is exactly what is unfolding here. Maybe your emotional honesty interrupted their numbness at precisely the right moment. Maybe the way you listened made them feel safe enough to begin softening again. Maybe your quietness communicated more intimacy than anything loud ever could. And maybe somewhere right now, in whatever room they are sitting in, they are still turning your words over in their mind, wondering whether the pull they feel is only in their imagination, wondering whether you sense even a fraction of what they feel, wondering why even the memory of your presence feels so difficult to move away from, because some people reach something in the subconscious that ordinary experience cannot reach. And once that kind of contact is made, the impression does not simply dissolve. So if someone younger has been moving closer to you emotionally in ways you have felt but not yet named, resist the urge to simplify it. Human connection is almost never simple. Instead, stay curious, stay honest, stay grounded in who you are, and hold both your own heart and theirs with genuine care, because some connections do not arrive to fill time. They arrive to remind us that beneath all the careful self-protection, beneath the accumulated disappointments and the routines we build to keep ourselves safe, the human soul is still reaching toward genuine closeness, not as a weakness, not as a failing, but as the most honest and irreducible thing about us. If something in these words touched a quiet place in you tonight, it may not be coincidence so much as recognition, like an old part of you briefly stepping into light and realizing it was never as lost as it felt. Sometimes we don't need new information as much as we need language for what we have already been carrying alone for too long. And if that recognition lingers, even faintly, it is worth honoring. Not by overanalyzing it, but by letting it settle gently into the parts of you that usually stay unspoken. The places where you learn to stay strong instead of honest, patient instead of seen, understanding instead of understood. Because what you carry emotionally is not small. It is layered, perceptive, deeply responsive to people and moments that others might pass through without noticing. That kind of depth can feel heavy when it has nowhere to land, especially when it is met with inconsistency or absence. But it is also the very thing that allows you to form connections that feel real, meaningful, and unforgettable. Still, depth is not meant to be spent endlessly on people who cannot meet it halfway. It is not meant to be diluted just to stay close to someone uncertain. It is meant to be shared where presence is mutual, where emotional effort is returned, where you do not have to translate yourself to be understood. So if this moment brought anything into focus, let it be this. You do not have to keep proving the value of your emotional world. The right spaces will not require proof. They will recognize it naturally. And until those spaces fully take shape in your life, you are allowed to protect your inner quiet without guilt. You are allowed to step back from anything that asks you to overextend just to remain included. You are allowed to choose steadiness over intensity, clarity over confusion, reciprocity over guessing. Carry your heart gently, not because it is fragile, but because it is rare in the way it notices, feels, and remembers. And even when it feels unseen, it is still shaping the world around you in ways that are more significant than you may ever receive credit for. And when you return to these kinds of reflections again, it will not be because you are searching for answers, but because you are learning to live in alignment with what you already know.